COGE's lead for the POC. And you wonder what the POC is. The POC is a Publicity Outreach and Communications Subcommission of the COGE. And this afternoon, I will be joined with Scott and a couple of other, COGE team members. These webinars are a result of a combined effort from COGE Public Outreach and Communication Subcommission and the COGE Social Media Committee to advance discussions on international geoscience education and to help strengthen network of geoscience educators at local, regional, and the global scale. As such, we have an exciting first webinar today with our speaker introduced by COGE's Khalud Mohammed from Egypt. We also have COGE's Inas Ahmed, also from Egypt, who will provide the technical support, including moderating the chat. Before Khalud introduces the speaker, I would like to pass the microphone to COGE's social media coordinator from the USA, Scott Miller. Please take it over from here.
Thank you very much, Agogo. I would like to say to everyone, welcome also, and please be advised to keep your microphones muted for the duration of the webinar, allowing our speaker to communicate. And also to please, as this webinar is being recorded to post later on the COGE YouTube channel, we ask that please keep all comments in the chat and over voice to be as respectful as possible. And time permitting, at the end of the lecture, which I'm sure we'll have, will be time for questions and answers and discussion. Thank you again so much for attending. And now I will pass to Khalud to introduce our speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon from Egypt. I am Dr. Khalud Mohammed. Good morning and good evening, everyone all over the world. Welcome to our webinar, first webinar on perspective in geoscience education in Africa. We are excited to have you join us today for this interesting topic. Geoscience plays a key role in understanding and addressing the challenges and opportunities facing Africa. Our webinars aim to explore the current state of geoscience education in the region and discuss potential solution and future direction. Our speaker today is Professor Gbenga. He will bring a wealth of experience and expertise in geoscience education and research. Let me introduce Professor Gbenga briefly. Professor Gbenga holds a PhD degree in economic geology of the University of Ibadan, Nigeria, where he is currently a full professor and the head department of geology. He has previously got a BSc geology of the University of Iran, 1982, and a master of exploration geology, Ahmed Bello University, 1991. He has handled numerous consultants assessment for international and local agency and companies, including Africa Development Bank and the World Bank. He currently has about 106 publications to his credit in many reputational journals, conference proceedings, book chapters, and he has successfully supervised 9 PhD dissertations and over 30 master student theses. He is currently the president of Geology Society of Africa, past president of the Nigerian Mining and Geoscience Society, president of the Geoscience Information and Research in Africa Network, and vice president for Africa Association of Geoscience for International Development. The mic now with Professor Gbenga for 40 minutes.
All right. Thank you very much, Khalud. Can I start now?
Yes. Yes, you can start.
Thank you very much. I'm very grateful. First of all, I want to express my gratitude to COGE and the entire team for this kind invitation. And I'm so grateful to have this opportunity to present perspectives on geoscience education in Africa from my point of view, and also to say that on behalf of the Geological Society of Africa, we are happy to collaborate and to associate ourselves with this, the Commission on Geoscience Education of the IUGS. And of course, we are partners in progress, and would like to continue to carry these further. So on behalf of the Council of GSAfR and all the entire members, we appreciate you. And so what I've been asked to do today is a very wide topic, but I'll just like to, I hope I can, within 40 minutes, give a kind of a synopsis, not just the entire scenario, but a synopsis of maybe the perspective on geoscience education in Africa. What is the current state at different levels, the tertiary, the secondary, and even in terms of awareness or even geoscience education in Africa, in terms of its contribution to the many societal challenges, many societal concepts. So then how effective is it? Then what are the some of the challenges that we are experiencing, and how some of the solutions that we can profile and how we can carry it further, because geoscience education is very key. That's the beginning of anything that has to do with understanding the earth, the earth system science, the completeness of the earth in terms of trying to elucidate the concept of the earth system. So it's very important. So there's the first slide. I've been introduced. Can we go on to the next slide? And I'll be doing that with Enes, who is going to be assisting me in prompting the slide. So earth science education, or earth science, let me say, as an academic and professional field, encompasses broad range of disciplines, like we all know. And each of these disciplines has a fascinating and unique beginning. Now, one that is widely used, the scientific method was geology. That is the first early scientific method that is used in elucidating even the concept of the earth system, the origin of the earth, the evolution of the earth system, growth of the earth system. Specifically, understanding mineralogy, which is the study of the structure, chemistry, and maybe physical properties of the minerals. Now, humans over the years have prized many kinds of minerals, particularly gems, precious metals, that has been used for tools. Iron metals have been used for tools since before the dawn of civilization. Geosciences, like we know, is also at the root of every civilization that we have had, even up till today. Infrastructure. There is nothing that we want to do infrastructure-wise in the world now that will not start with the geosciences. Whether it's construction, you have to understand the soils. You have to understand the raw materials that you can even use to build, whether it's roads, whether it's bridges, whether it's buildings. Even in the digital world, all the raw materials that are needed for this new industrial revolution, for this new IT revolution, for this new AI revolution, are materials from the earth, like we all know. Whether it's now the concept of critical minerals or the essential minerals or green minerals, geoscience, understanding of basic principles of geoscience, even right from the beginning, is sine qua non to understanding the concept of this new revolution. So no surprise that even as scientific method gained popularity in the 16th and 17th century, study of minerals, understanding the earth system became an area of great interest and activity. Let's go on to the next slide. So if we look at historical concepts, and I'm trying to build maybe the foundation, founder of modern geologic thought, which is Nicholas Steno, who lived from between 1638 and 1686. He also rules on stratigraphy, people like James Houghton, like we know, Charles Lyell, and after even Lyell died in 1875, months later, we had polymath. We had people like Francis Galton, who published the first weather map, Emil Wichert, who proposed the Earth, who proposed that the Earth had different layers, and including a mantle of silicates and core of iron and so on. And of course, we have seen that in the last quarter of the 19th century, we had activities, great activities in the earth sciences, and all of the major branches which have been established now since the 1900s. So let's have the next slide. So coming back now to Africa, I'm going to establish synoptically the contribution of maybe geosciences, from historical point of view, from both medieval civilization even to modern civilization. We come back to Africa. This is the basics of our discussion, so to say, today, the geology of Africa, the different rock formations that we have from the cratons, to the mobile belts, to the sedimentary basins, like we have the West African craton, the Congo craton, East African craton, and so on, and then the sedimentary basins, maybe even from Precambrian to recent, that are all constituted to understanding the nature of evolution of the earth system in Africa. The different concepts of the evolution of the rocks, the mineralogical context, the economic mineralogical context, even up to understanding the contributions of these to climate situations, climate change, utilization of civilization, and all that. So this is the geology of Africa, and this is where we start from. Next slide. And so we also know, if we look at it in terms of resources, Africa is blessed with natural and mineral resources. And then I've mentioned that science emerged in this part of the planet long even before Europeans colonized it. And we can read even go back to reference the Egyptian civilization, from the North African civilization, science, emergence of science and all that, especially in North Africa, Central Africa, East Africa, from Sudan, and so on. So we also know that Africa has the world's oldest record of human technological advancement, or achievement rather, old. And the oldest stone tools were found also in Africa. So can we move on to the next slide? So these are just showing the distribution, synoptic distribution of the minerals that we have, mineral endowments that we have, deposit that we have in Africa, from the West African part, on the West African craton, to the Trans-Sahara belt, to the East Saharan metacraton, to Congo craton, which is now the center of a lot of mineralization of mineral deposits in Africa, and is attracting a lot of global attention, even to the Kalahari craton, the South African side, the East African rift, and the mineralizations, coal, copper, diamonds, gold, associated minerals, heavy mineral sands, manganese, nickel, oil and gas, and so on and so forth. Great endowment. Geoscience at the background of it, is at the foundation of it. But how far have we been able as Africans to really understand the basic principles that undermine or underwrite this? And that is where the geoscience education comes in. How aware are the people? At what level are we in both in the tertiary, in the secondary, even in the non-formal school state of understanding the concept of geoscience education? And also looking at how even we have developed, to some extent, even our tertiary education, whether it is in line with an understanding of even, let's start with the resource that we have in Africa. Let's look at those endowed nations and look at the level of geoscience education we have in those endowed nations, whether it is commensurate or whether there is a lacuna, or whether there are lapses. So we have looked at the concept of contribution of Africa in terms of geoscience and science evolution, so to say. And then we have looked at the geology, we have looked at the endowment, that, okay, we have this thing there. Now, the education of it. How do people learn about this? How are they able to even now control the understanding and the knowledge of the evolution of this resource and the endowments that we are talking about? Next slide. So again, in terms of resources, up till about 3 or 4 years ago, this slide shows the level of attention in terms of the budgets for exploration in Africa compared to the rest of the world. So Africa also has a center, is also a center of interest in terms of mineralization globally. And if we look at this slide, you see the different countries in Africa and the percentage of exploration budget that they attract globally. For example, South Africa, about 1% of the global exploration budget of the whole world. Ghana, about 0.9%. Cote d'Ivoire, about 0.7%. Even Mali, 1%. And it's not really, it's still comparable even to what we have to some extent in South America. In country for a place like Ecuador and Colombia and so on. So we've had countries in Africa like DRC having as much as 2% of the global budget for exploration for mineral resources, for endowments globally. And this also compared to, well, we may not be able to compare this with what we have in Australia that attracted about 13%, or Canada that are 14%. But if we add up all these percentages, we will discover they're in the range of about 9 to 10%, which is comparable to what you have either in Canada, or even higher than what you have in the United States, and maybe some places like Southeast Asia, India, and so on. Next slide, please. So same thing, I've just tried to show this graphically. Worldwide exploration budgets and the Africa compared to what we have in the world. Next slide, please. And then the contributions. We've seen that, of course, our resource in Africa and has contributed to a large extent to the mining of the contribution of mining and our resource to the GDP of those countries. If you look at Tanzania, 4% of their GDP is from mining. Ghana, more than 5%, Mali, about 7%, South Africa, 8%, Namibia, 11%, Zambia mining, 12%, Botswana mining, contributing about 24%, now getting higher to the GDP. And the DRC industrial sector, which is dominated by mining and mining-related construction, contributing as high Hello, I think I'm back.
Yes, you're
Okay,
back.
so
Thank you.
I'm sorry. So,
Yes,
yeah,
Professor,
so
you are back now.
Now, okay, so what then, having looked at this, the fact that we have this resource contribution to the development of many African countries. So how does this now tally with understanding the role of geoscience in contributing to this, even from the tertiary level? The next slide. The next slide. Enos? Yeah, okay. So let's look at the top 200 universities that you have in Africa, 70% of these top 200 universities in Africa offer geoscience education, geology, geoscience related courses, geophysics, geology, environmental geoscience, and so on. And we see the different countries and their universities. Next slide, it's still continuing. Now, from Angola down to Egypt and all the top 200 universities. Go ahead, please. Now go ahead, you can see now that's up to 200, that's the top rank. Now, let's now look at the distribution. And please kindly follow these up as I'm presenting this, because I'm trying to bring out something, a perspective that we need to look at in terms of understanding the lacuna between education and the endowment, and see what and where we have some issues and where we need to look at. Let's look at the distribution of the top 200 African universities, majority of them offering geosciences. And this data is gotten from the Times Higher Education, is gotten from the initiative that the Geoscience of Africa did some years ago with UNESCO, that is called the ANESI, African Network of Art Science Institutions. And if you look at the distribution by country, we see that countries like Egypt, Algeria, and Nigeria and South Africa actually range in the top, have more universities in the top 200. South Africa, Nigeria, mostly. With Nigeria, we have close to about 90 universities now offering geosciences. We have close to more than 200 universities alone in Nigeria, more than 90, no, about 156 now, yes, close to. Then more than 90 now, both private and public and state universities offering geosciences. Egypt also, Algeria, South Africa. The rest, like Zimbabwe, Zambia, Mozambique, and even Angola, Togo, have minimal contribution. What am I trying to drive at? Look at these countries where they cannot account for the top 200 geoscience training institutions or universities, and look at the level of the endowment. If we look at the previous file, and I'm going to show with the next series of slides to show that there is a kind of a misnomer where you have much of the endowments that we have pointed out. The geoscience education institutions, the geoscience education, geoscience institution, geoscience learning are lower than those regions that are moderately endowed. Congo Democratic Republic, for example, is more endowed by any standards than Nigeria, more endowed by any standard than Egypt, more endowed by any standards in terms of mineral endowment. And this is the reality within that Congo Craton. They have virtually all the hard minerals that you can think of, whether it's gold, whether it's diamond, whether it's a cobalt, whether it's a lithium, whether it's a columbotantalite, and all the rest, more than other areas in the world. But now look at the level of tertiary education there compared to what we have in other places when we're looking at the top 200 universities in Africa, and also places like Zambia, places like even Mali, where you have a lot of endowments of gold, Zimbabwe. These are highly endowed areas. Places like Botswana, where 22.5% of the mining contributes about more than 20% of the GDP to mining, and then compared the education, geoscience education, there I think about just 4 or 5 universities offering geoscience education, compared it to that of Nigeria or Egypt. Next slide, please. Same thing. Let's look at the top 20 universities in Africa. Looking at the 2023 league table, not the 2018 league table. So we see that top 20 universities: South Africa, well, Egypt and Nigeria almost sharing the same maybe level. and then Angola, Kenya, and so on. So in terms of endowment, maybe apart from South Africa, in terms of base metals, platinum, diamond, platinum group metals, diamond, gold, and all that, they will not be able to compare with what we have within the Central African republics and the East African Republic, the East African Craton, the Congo Craton, and all that. But they account for top 20 universities. Same thing with Nigeria and Egypt. In terms of mineralization, endowment, these two countries don't account for the top 10 mining countries in Africa. Still, they have at least more geoscience training centers that are top-notch than where you have the endowed countries. So we are seeing a kind of a disparity. We are seeing a kind of a lacuna. We are seeing a kind of non-consistency in terms of the endowment, in terms of utilization and the capacity where geoscience education forms a fulcrum. Next slide, please. So again, we saw the distribution of top 200 universities. Again, the North and the West and the are top, and we see the Central, the endowed areas, so to say, and the East, not comparable to what we have in North, South, and West. Next slide, please. So again, those are for geology, geosciences. Now this is for mining engineering institutes, those who are to do the mining. Maybe the first ones are those who are involved in exploration, assessment, environmental considerations, and so on. Now, these are the ones that will really design the mines, that will do the actual mining, so to say. What's the distribution? Just brought out this picture, the mining engineering institutions that we have in Africa. Next slide. Now, if we look at it also by country, almost the same scenario that we're having with geoscience institutions. I decided to differentiate or to break into two, the geoscience and mining, because the geoscience forms the exploration, the understanding, and all that. The mining actually does the engineering and bringing it out in terms of exploitation. One is exploration, assessment, and the other is the exploitation and the mining. And let's look at even in countries that are in Africa, with university offering mining engineering. We still see that we have peaked there, South Africa, and then, of course, Zimbabwe is up here. But if we look at places like Ghana that are also endowed now, Tanzania, and maybe Sudan, and so on, there is a kind of a contrast. South Africa maintains its consistency. Zimbabwe has now more mining engineering institutions that can do the mining, but with the exploration, they are deficient in terms of capacity, as we see from the training institutions. Same thing, we have Egypt, have many mining engineering institutions, but in terms of endowment, we cannot compare them with the Central African countries, which are more endowed. Now we see that the Central African countries that even are more endowed are virtually missing in this narrative. They are virtually missing in this narrative. So the perspective here has to do with, okay, where are the endowments? Where is the capacity? Where is the understanding of the basics of geoscience education to understand the concept of the evolution of these mineral deposits and even be able to be part of those who will bring it out and own, so to say, this resulted by the understanding of the basic concept. So for mining engineering, those who are going to do the exploitation, so to say, we now see a kind of also a lacuna. Next slide, please. Now, this is a region-based distribution of African universities offering mining engineering, maybe either diploma, higher diploma, but I just grouped everyone. North and all that. So relative endowments, as we see from the map, higher in the Central and the West, but in terms of geoscience education capacity, higher in the North and East, which are less endowed. So the perspective shows that there is a kind of disequilibrium in terms of education in terms of which leads to capacity development and understanding the resource base of the African continent. Next slide, please. So next, so again, I try to now match it on the resource map of Africa, and we can see what we're saying. Let's look at this central region, the central region, the Congo Craton with the endowments, and we see it low level. Same thing with the East African region. We can see the level of endowment, and it's so low. But now let's now look at maybe the north with higher something and see that we're only having some marginal, so to say. We cannot compare the intensity with what we have here in the south and in the central with what we have in the north. So there is a kind of a misbalance in terms of tertiary education of geosciences and understand and the resource base of or endowment of Africa. Next slide. So same thing with looking at the mining engineering. Central Africa is so low. North is wide. South is also marginal with East, but we can see the intensity of endowment. Next slide. Okay, so all this now leads. Now Africa, as I now have been, I mean, the global world is talking about competency. These mineral resources are there in Africa, but where is the level of the competence? Competence means education plus qualification plus experience. And I'm looking at Swindel's definition of 2017. So somebody who has competence, belongs to a professional organization, follows a code of ethics, and who is willing to discuss his or her results with his or her peers. But it comes with you having the education, the qualification, and the experience. So we now have more of people coming outside Africa to access those deposits, to explore for those deposits, to exploit those deposits. We have seen the level of the budget of relative budget percentage in terms of mineral resources that go into Africa globally, which is also comparable with what we have in other parts of the world. But we have seen that the level of competence, especially in endowed areas for Africa, is low and is not commensurate with the level of endowment. So the competence and the endowment and the capacity, there's a huge gap. So if we now have the budgets coming to Africa, 80% of those budgets go outside Africa. Why? Because of lacuna of geoscience education. Those that are actually considered as competent people to sign the reports, to be able to take responsibility for exploration reports, to take responsibility for mine products and assessment. So geoscience education in Africa does not really now match, so to say, with the understanding of the concept of the resources that we have in Africa. That's one perspective in which I'm looking at it, that we really now need to begin to find solutions to. Next slide, please. So I now tried to say, okay, we've looked at the tertiary, and I decided to start maybe from the tertiary. That's at the end. I mean, at the end of the day, you need graduates, so we're now going to the field, trained in the geosciences, be able to give us the geology, be able to tell us concepts of the origin of those rocks and the minerals and the endowment and all that. No, but it doesn't really start from there. I looked at geoscience education from the point of view of even people being aware of what geoscience education is in terms of contribution to the different areas of national development or continental development or global development. And so I carried out this survey over some years ago, and it was published about some few years ago in the Journal of Geoscience Education. So we started trying to look at, okay, what's the geoscience awareness amongst the population? Different aspects of the population, or different categories of the population. So it was a questionnaire method which was adopted. Oral interviews were conducted in some areas, low literacy level of some of the respondents because of that, especially among the artisanal miners, primary school students, and so on in the northern zones of Nigeria. We used Nigeria then as a pilot study. We couldn't continue because of issues with funding in other African countries, but we're able to start even with Nigeria. So we had 15% of the total number of respondents were interviewed orally, and about 22,000 questionnaires all over were distributed all over Nigeria. We had about 96.59% responded. That's about 21,500 plus responded. Next slide, please. And 4 main groups of respondents were identified. One, the students. We tried to distinguish between those at the primary, secondary, and tertiary levels, and with those in the last category following courses not related to geoscience, because we really wanted those in the geosciences will be aware because they are being taught. But those who are not in the courses that are not necessarily related to geosciences, because that's where we want to stand from. Do people really have an understanding of what geoscience education means in terms of contribution to the different aspects we will see shortly? So we looked at number 2 category, professionals. The professionals comprise of teachers, mainly at primary and secondary school levels, medical personnel, mainly doctors, pharmacists, and nurses, finance workers, namely bankers, financial consultants, and accountants, and civil servants. And then the third group were the artisanal miners, which in Africa, artisanal mining, except maybe South Africa and some other few countries, in most of Africa, artisanal mining still accounts for over 60% of the mining scenario in Africa. So all these, the artisanal mining, let's even ask them, do you know the level of geoscience education into how all what you're doing, what you're mining, how they evolved and all that? Then the last group were even traders in the informal sector, including artisans, market retailers, and distributors. So what did we find? Next slide. So this is the study that was published in the Journal of Geoscience Education. The result, that's the study that we did, this geoscience awareness in Nigeria. Next slide. And what were the results? So we looked at it in different perspectives. One, geoscience, the geoscience, relation of geoscience to mineral endowment. What's their level of understanding? And the results were very interesting. Among the students, in the different, we had the geopolitical zones in Nigeria, southeast, south-south, southwest, northwest, north central, northeast. Interesting results shows that in the southeast, those who had the highest level of understanding of geoscience in relation to mineral endowment were in the southeast, followed by those in the south-south, southwest, and so on. And what's the reason? There is a lot of oil exploration in the southern south part of Africa, Nigeria, where you have the oil and gas exploration. So the awareness is a bit higher there. And then, of course, the tertiary in the southeast, following in the south. But amongst the primary schools, we had very low level of understanding. So do we need to start letting them know about geosciences right from the primary schools? Same thing with secondary, just marginal. And then we have, of course, the north parts of the country were very low compared to what we have in the southern parts of the country. The same thing with professionals. Look at, okay, what's the geoscience, relation of geosciences to mineral endowment? How do you understand that relation? What is it to you? Within the ones that really had more are the medical people, 55.56% for Southeast, 65.01% for South-South, and so on. The list, of course, that we had are also those in the north parts of Africa, but in the northeast, we had quite a high percentage in the medical profession, more than what you have even among the teachers, except the teachers in the south-south, where you have a lot of oil mining activity. Even the south, the civil servants, the awareness were even lower than what you had with the medicals, and even with the finance people. The finance people had the highest. They had an understanding of how geoscience is contributing to mineral endowment. Quite ironical. So 65.24%, 65.17%, and then more also in the south than in the north. And the miners, and you'll begin to understand why should it be the low among the miners? Because as far as the miners they were concerned, what they were, and when I looked at miners, I'm not talking of those who had been educated. Those who are actually the geologists. We are not looking at those who had undergone some kind of tertiary education. Amongst the majority of what we call now the mines laborers, the artisanal miners, or the low-level miners, how do they even know whether what they're doing, there is a study, there is a course, there is a training that will contribute to how they understand this more. And it's much, much lower than what you have with the mind, with the finance people, with the medical people. So even those who are involved in rural low-scale mining do not have a low knowledge of awareness of geoscience contribution, geoscience education contribution to mineral endowment. Same thing with the traders, which is the least. Next slide. So we also did this. Next slide. So understanding geoscience awareness and relation to environmental hazards. And among the primary school students, we saw how low it is. Secondary, very low. And tertiary, even low. In all the areas, except maybe in the south again, because those ones, experience a lot of environmental hazards from oil and gas, exploration. But again, with the teachers in the southeast, relatively higher, the medicals also, but relatively higher, civil servants, and the miners, very low. Of course, the traders too are very low. In terms of how does geoscience education, how does geology, understanding geology or geophysics contribute to you understanding environmental hazard? What does it have to do with flooding? What does it have to do with even the pollution from mining and all that? So we have the teachers, especially in the southeast, having an understanding, south, and then the others are very low. But look at the primary, secondary, and tertiary, where actually this should start from. It's abysmally low. So as it is with the awareness of geoscience education to mineral endowment, so it is with environmental hazard. Next slide, please. So same thing with agric and food supply. I'd had the opportunity of presenting at the IGC, and I'm working on a project that is very dear to me now, agro minerals and food security in Africa. And we see as everybody's talking about the energy transition and all, and it's good. I've also contributed with a lot of research on critical minerals and all that. But I think the first energy that anybody needs is the energy of the body. If you are not strong, you have not eaten, and you have no food, you won't even have any energy to do research. So that's the first energy. And I've been looking at the role of these agro minerals, agricultural minerals, like phosphate, like gypsum, potash and all that, ash, feldspars, potassic feldspars and all that, that contributes to soil nutrient enhancement and ultimately sorry for that little glitch. Am I back now?
We have
yes, you're back.
Yes, you
Professor.
are.
Okay, thank you. So now, so we looked at it in relation to agric and food supply. What's your understanding of the contribution of geoscience to even food and agriculture? And primary school again, in fact, in the Northeast, as far as they are concerned, what has rocks got to do with food? What does these minerals got to do with food? So the awareness level is low all over, except maybe even low, even among the medicals compared to what we have with the mineral endowment environment. So in terms of contribution of agric and food, of course, but they use, and they use a lot of fertilizers in the northern parts of the country. And this study that we looked at may not really, at the end of the day, of course, we have not done that, but as pilot may not be different from maybe what we have in many African countries. but we cannot yet confirm. But we are thinking it may also have some kind of replication across. So to many of them, what we talk of phosphates, they will not be understand that phosphates, even fertilizers, are made from these raw materials of phosphates, of carbonates, and all that. So in terms of contribution of geosciences, and to food supply, to agriculture, it's again abysmally low, and especially even among the students. Next slide, please. Same thing, we now look, okay, what has geosciences got to contribute to water supply? And of course, we know for hydrogeology, hydrology, water supply, geosciences is basic in understanding the horizons of water, aquifer system, water movement, underground water, surface water, and all that. So we looked at again, do you understand the role of geoscience in water supply? Same trends, but we know that with the medical, we had some fairly higher understanding relative to the other groups of respondents. Like the Southeast is still also like the Southeast where we have the highest, but look at the students from primary to secondary, tertiary, also very low. As a matter of fact, among the traders, just like you have with some of the respondents in the North primary school, is they don't really know where your geosciences, your understanding of the geosciences will contribute to how they get water from their wells and all that. So next slide, even among the civil servants, relatively low. Now to national generally, now what it does, how does geosciences and the understanding of concept of geosciences contribute to national development? Again, among the students group, it's low. The teachers higher something in the North Central, quite ironically, in terms of contributing to national development, we're having some peak, 32.61. The medicals in the North Central and civil servants have this idea of general contribution to national development. According to them, they know that they are the oil and gas and all that, the money, at least if their salary is not paid, and that's a general trend, then that means maybe they are not selling more oil. How does this understanding of geoscience now contribute to this? So we see that we also have high level of disparities amongst the different levels, especially the students. Next slide. So I just tried to show all these things graphically. Everything I have mentioned earlier, we looked at it graphically, and we can see how awareness level of geoscience in relation to mineral endowment. I've shown the relative percentages and using these bar charts. Next slide. Same
we
thing
have
with the
50 minutes, Professor.
No, I'm almost concluding. Next slide. So next slide. And so we just look at the food supply. Next slide, domestic and irrigation, and then national development. Go ahead, please. So next slide, please. So now, what's the current position of geoscience education at school level across the world? We can summarize it as follows. Geoscience as a small, is almost a small compulsory part of national science curriculum. It's still for Southern Europe, UK, Japan, New Zealand, South Africa, it's, maybe it's taught by art science and general science students, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, UK, mostly taught by chemistry specialists, geoscience, a small geographic curriculum in many Northern European countries, but in many African countries, little geoscience is taught in any area of the curriculum. Next slide. And that's where we are looking at. Now, we also looked at the Nigerian example. When we saw this, and I want to give credit to the late Professor Chris King, who had really been our friend in terms of this geoscience awareness survey. He was in Nigeria twice, and he also suggested, and we wrote a curriculum together to try to pursue it so that we can have geoscience education in the curriculum of the national policy on education in Nigeria. We succeeded only partially, but even the partial success is also something that is a good step and which we recommend also to other African countries. Next slide. Because we saw that the lacuna was among the students in terms of understanding these perspectives by primary, tertiary, secondary. So we looked at the secondary, And these are the fields of studies that were approved by that National Policy on Education. Next slide, please. Next slide. So what we did, if you look at, no, please, before that time, please go back and ask. Now, if you look at, I don't know whether you can see 23 there, we saw mining. What we attempted and succeeded in doing is to have mining, they now call some areas of the students' curriculum as trade curriculum. They couldn't put them into the main subjects curriculum because according to them, it was already loaded up. They were having almost 20 students, 20 subjects there. If you look at the last slide, it's there. But what we succeeded in doing is to introduce it with other trade curriculum, which is also now offered at the West African school certificate level. What do we call that? Like the GCE. That's like, I don't know what it is in other countries, but that is the top exams you do at secondary school level for you to be able to move on even to universities. And there we have now been able to have this trade, to group it with the trade curriculum where mining is taught. And the mining is taught with geology, so mining engineering. Well, it's also grouped with like auto body, electrical works and all that. But we believe it's an entrance where at least some level of geoscience education is now in the curriculum. And on the right side, you see the West African Examination Council. The next slide, please. You will see that they now have an exam. They did an examination and is offered now in the West African School Certificate Examination. What do we mean by this? Is a cross-examination that is done, in West Africa, comprising many West African countries, I think about 10 or so West African countries. I don't know the actual number, but across West Africa. And for Nigeria now, we have a curriculum that is now being offered at that secondary school level. So we believe with this, and then if you look at, it's not too clear, but you see some of the questions that are there is, for example, give one answer to each question. The cutting or polish of gemstone is gemology and all that. Overboarding, arts, the inner layer, separating crust from core is known as mantle, magma, and all that. So we are able to understand the basics of geoscience education even at the secondary level that is now being offered at secondary school level under the National Policy on Education. Next slide, please. And I'm now almost coasting home. And so these are the strategies for geoscience education that for delivery, we must take into consideration these 5 distinct attributes. It's interpretative. It plays crucial role in development of holistic system thinking, requires high-level spatial ability. Geoscience fieldwork, we must try and make it attractive. Fieldwork helps a lot, and it makes the students to understand this. And practical aspects of it where they can see it as different from just an abstract course. Next slide. And so what are the challenges which I've mentioned? We just go through. Policy resistance. There's policy resistance to holistic geoscience education curriculum in most schools. So we have to develop strategies like we did in Nigeria. African countries can look at this, especially with those regions where they have a high level of endowment but low capacity because of lack of understanding of or lack of knowledge or lack of training in the geosciences that needs to come from even the secondary level moving into the tertiary level. Of course, availability of well-trained geoscience teachers is also not there. We have inadequate funding, a prospect of employment after training. This is also some problems now that we have in some countries. I have some of my students that graduated in Benin, in Togo Republic and all. And after graduation said, oh, prof, there is no job. So it again dampens some of the enthusiasm to go into really understanding or teaching this geoscience. But if we have the curriculum introduced into secondary school through any strategic thinking, we can even reduce the level of employment. If the understanding of capacity development, while we have many expatriates coming into Africa to do exploration and all that, when would they see the level of capacity development, it will reduce the inflow of such expatriates, and many of the African nationals will be able to have jobs. So what are the solutions? We need intra and intergovernment advocacy. It's important. We cannot stand alone. We did it consistently over many years. We didn't succeed. Sometimes we succeed, sometimes we don't succeed in Nigeria. But now at least it's in the trade curriculum. Some of the students are offering it. What we need to do is to intensify advocacy at the secondary school level, intensify advocacy at higher tertiary levels to make them more aware of the need to study geoscience education and make it also more attractive, more curriculum advocacy, global collaborations. Then we need now to have focused initiatives. And that's why I appreciate this COGE webinar. Now we can develop initiatives like we have done earlier with the ANESI UNESCO GSAf initiatives, where we had the survey of African national and African network of art science institutions. We did their surveys. What do they have? What's the capacity that they have and all that? And then AGID also at some point, the Association of Geoscience for International Development, had a program for geoscience awareness in schools, where we go to primary schools and tell them about geoscience education, secondary schools where we tell them about geoscience education. And I believe COGE, what WAXI also has, then PanAfGeo, that's a collaborative initiative of the European Union and the Geology surveys of Africa, Organization of African Geological Survey, in which also the Geological Society of Africa is somehow involved in training geologists at the Geological Survey. And I think the PanAfGeo 3, which they will review now in Zambia, is going to take in even more of education of those at the tertiary level. But we need initiatives that can come down also to the secondary school level. And also, the African Union is involved in this very laudable initiative of Pan-African Union Life and Art Science Institutions, where we have a center of excellences across Africa. We have one in Nigeria, in Ibadan, where we train students on art science and petroleum and mineral exploration from all over Africa. But that's even at postgraduate levels. So, but we need more focused initiatives that can take care of the broad stratum of geoscience education appreciation, even in Africa. And this calls for a lot of collaboration. Next slide. I want to say thank you for listening to me. Asante Sana. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Gbenga, for your perspective contribution and interesting topic. We have covered a lot of ground today, from the challenging facing geoscience education in Africa. We would like to open the floor for questions and comments from our audience. Please feel free to type your questions into the chat box. Okay, I will. Can you let me to ask you a question?
Yes,
Professor
please.
Gbenga? Okay. Do you find that the role of technology, artificial intelligence, and the new technology nowadays can play a role in enhancing the geoscience education in Africa?
Certainly. I believe so much that AI, artificial intelligence, and all that can enhance, and it's important. But we also have to have a caveat. Geoscience education is still, to a great extent, field work based. We must make them to even appreciate on ground. I know that with what is happening, we have to introduce a lot of digitization and all that online, and this, it will help. But first of all, most education, most of education delivery in many African countries still have to be inculcated into the school curriculum. Still have to be inculcated in the school curriculum. And this is very important. Again, we have to now move towards trying to let the schools and the various education ministries understand the unique position of geosciences. Of course, still emphasize that it is interrelated to chemistry, is interrelated to biology, but that geosciences is the foundation and not those courses. Not chemistry is not the foundation for geosciences. Physics is not the, geology is the foundation that deals with all those other courses. So AI is important, but we must also, in trying to look at digital development, which is essential, which is necessary, not lose sight of the practical nature and the field nature of the geosciences education delivery. That's just what I want to say, but it's important. Yeah.
Yes, I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Okay, so Do we have any questions here?
Yes, Khalud, there's a question in the chat, in
Okay.
the Q&A, excuse me. I can read it if you like.
Okay. You can read it. I can't reach QA.
Sure. This question comes from Roberto Greco, a COGI member in Brazil, who I don't think was able to attend, but would like to ask you, Professor. In order to train future teachers in geoscience education, it is necessary to have academic departments conduct teacher training. Do you see academic geoscientists open to this in Africa?
Yes, it is very, very essential. In fact, it's very key. Now, I'm not trained. For example, let me give my an example. I'm not trained as a teacher education. Some of us who are lecturers at university level were geoscientists, were geologists, but we are not trained in the understanding the pedagogy, let me use that word, or the delivery that will make it to be attractive to secondary school participants. So teacher education is very key. And then we need to link up with the faculties of education. And this is where I will also still mention the contribution of Professor Chris King and even somebody like Orion and many of the other people who are in the, late Professor Kiel was in the faculty or was in the Education Institute or something, or Faculty of Education, University of Kiel, that's in UK, but he was a geoscience, he's a geoscientist, was able to now get the Geoscience Teachers Association, which is now global. We can replicate this by getting the faculties of education to have what is called the teacher, the course or subject components of the education as geology. I remember one of our old colleagues in those days, it was being done in my university, University of Ibadan, where people we graduate BSc education in geology, BSc education geology in bracket, just like they do for BSc education chemistry, BSc education biology, BSc education, and those are the ones that will now go to the secondary schools and teach, because they have been taught in how to really teach, secondary school students, especially in geoscience. So it is important. And I mentioned it as one of the challenges, that we don't have many geoscience teachers to handle this. So if the faculties of education of the different universities and tertiary institutions in Africa can be mobilized, can have advocacy, and they can have people, they can have as part of their subject course for education as geology or hydrogeology or whatever, starting from geology, then it will help a lot. We're looking at this also concerning the case of Nigeria, where they're now offering the subject at West Africa Examination Council. Students are now offering it, but who are those teaching them? So geologists also can be encouraged to go for diploma in education, just 9 months, so that they can now combine their geology knowledge with that of the education professional delivery, and that will help a lot. So I agree completely that we need a lot of liaisons between our different departments of geology and departments of education of many of African universities to raise geoscience teachers. And of course, again, the other alternative is to have a situation where we have concentrated workshops, where we can have 1 week, 2 weeks workshop training for those who are geologists in educational delivery. For example, the IGO and even COGE can look at this, where they can organize workshops in Africa. We get groups of geoscientists who are interested in teacher education or teaching geosciences, have short workshops, 3 weeks intervals, 4 weeks intervals, or even online teaching that can give them a diploma in education, but having geology as a teaching subject, and they can go into the schools and teach geosciences. That's my perspective.
Yes. Okay, great.
Yes.
This is very important.
Okay.
I would like to take the moment. Sorry, Kulu. Let me jump in here and say that COGI has a program called the Geoscience Education Field Officers Program, and I will add a link to it in the chat, that does try to help train teachers around the world, geoscience teachers around the world, in primary and secondary schools, as well as at the university level. So, and COGI is considering, the plans are to be determined, but we are considering in-person training in Africa. So please, for those attendees that are listening now, please follow COGI and take a look into our programs that we may be able to achieve some of these great ideas that Professor Gbenga is discussing. There is another question or comment from Adama Sangare, and this question says, we have a proliferation of private schools in many countries offering geology, mining, and petroleum engineering courses. These schools are often run by businessmen and lack the capacity to provide adequate training and are motivated by profit, which has led to a decline in confidence and many unemployed graduates. Do you think that government should reinforce public universities rather than licensing private schools that may be unqualified?
Well, thank you very much, Adama. I think the problem or the concept of private university education in Africa is a problematic one. Like you said, some are profits and just looking at profits, and some of the curriculum delivery is getting a little bit shallow, all that. But I think where we need to concentrate on now are the public universities. They have been the center of really training and excellence. Those private universities, like you mentioned, can be very expensive. And of course, any student that goes there will want immediately that is going to the big time corporations and all that. So the public universities, we should, and let me also say this, no matter what, the curriculum that these private universities or even the public universities, whether at secondary or tertiary levels, operate, comes from the policy, the national education policy of each country, and also the curriculum policy of each country. This is where we need to concentrate on. I know, yes, there are qualifications, but many African countries also have what we call agencies that moderate them. Like in Nigeria, we have the National Universities Commission. So whether you are a private university or a public university, you must have accreditation. You undergo accreditation. So if not, your graduates will not be recognized. So we need to have monitoring, we need to have accreditations, but most essentially, we need to do some kind of a lot of advocacy to get geoscience education into the curriculum of both the secondary and tertiary levels. We cannot control the mode of delivery, but of course it will reflect on the kind of graduates that come out of all those institutions. So, but we need to at least at the level of governance, when I use governance, I mean educational policy, governance, monitoring, and delivery, be able to put it in, and then other things can follow when we now start churning out very good students, especially geoscience teachers who can go into all those institutions and make the difference. Yep. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
Professor.
you for the response. Go ahead, Khalid.
Okay, there's a question on the chat. Munira, I think. Munira. Thank you, Professor Gbenga, for your insightful presentation on geoscience education in Africa, which included in-depth data analysis. Do you believe that the low enrollment of students in geoscience program could be attributed to an outdated curriculum? If so, do you think that reconstructing the curriculum to emphasize the connection between geoscience education and sustainable development could make geoscience more appealing to students?
I completely agree with you that curriculum needs to be moderated over time. Some of the curriculum that we had 30, 25 years ago may not be applicable today. So there has to be curriculum modifications, and it's important. But one thing again, in the world of science, especially in the worlds of science education, is that curriculum takes a long time before they are approved. For example, you can't keep changing. Oh, you have a curriculum, then 3 months later you change the curriculum. So we also need to look at a concept in which our curriculum can be elastic. We need to build in a lot of elasticity into the curriculum, where we can introduce new concepts without necessarily altering the focus of the curriculum. And some of us are doing it at the tertiary levels. For example, many of our postgraduate students will now see that, yes, we need to have geology for science is important. Geology for research is important. But we see that many of our graduates also need to be employed. They need to be employed in applied areas. They need to be employed in the industries, in the mining industries. They need to be employed in the water industries. They need to be employed in the environmental industries. So if we see lacuna in the curriculum, which had been tailored just towards course delivery and research orientation, and geology for science only before, we need to now begin to expand. And how we need to do it now, like I'll give an example of that of Nigeria also, where the Nigerian Universities Commission is now introducing some, at least 30% that has to do with entrepreneurship in our geoscience curriculum. So, for example, geoscience in mining, so mineral economics. And then even now we know that you are going into industry, you must have standards and codes. Some of us are already teaching like the concept of the AMREC, the African Mineral Resource Management System, the Pan-African Resource Management System, SAMREC, and all those, so that by the time they go into industry, they are not too strange to these concepts. So the curriculum has to be elastic, and geoscience teachers or lecturers have to be open to new concepts that we balance geology for research, geology for science, and also geology for society, and geology for economic development, or geoscience for economic development. So I agree with you. We need to be flexible. We need to be open. We need to make it elastic, but we should avoid making it watery at the end of the day. So thank you.
Mary on the chat, she applying about the curriculum. While the curriculum needs needs moderation, I think we could start encouraging secondary school students, showing them what geoscience is all about by organizing summer schools and practical things like field work, which they can better understand what can incredible field geoscience is. And again, I think we need a strategy in this age of artificial intelligence and the LOT to attract young people that will become employable on graduation. What do you think about this, and how can it be achieved in your opinion?
I think I agree completely with you. And I mentioned that in my presentation. Alternatives to just formal training can be in terms of workshops, summer schools, attractive summer schools. I got involved somehow with some aspects of geoscience education about 12 years ago, 13 years ago, in my close association. Pardon me if I keep mentioning his name, and I think he was a former chairman of the Koge, or that's Professor Chris King. And I invited him there when I was special advisor to the Director General of the Geological Survey Society, Geological Survey of Nigeria, Nigerian Geological Survey Agency, to even let the geologists in the Geological Survey understand the concept of geoscience education. And the way he demonstrated it with practical ways, bringing apples, bringing pears, putting some what do you call it, peppermint inside Coke bottle.
Is there any problem?
We've lost you, Professor. We can't hear you anymore.
Just give him a minute because it's some kind of internet interruption. I think he will be back in a few seconds.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hello all. Let's give a few minutes for the speaker to get back online, because we would be sad to end the webinar without him. But I'll just take this time to thank all of you for attending. This has been a very educational webinar, and I think we've all learned a lot about the status of geoscience education in Africa.
Sorry. I'm sorry, I went off. Just something happened. Just let me just finish answering that question.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm
Okay.
sorry. Just sorry. What was the last? Okay, that's the aspect of the introduction. I was saying that I was introduced, with Professor Chris King, and I demonstrated it. So we need to look at those concepts to make it attractive. Get summer schools, field walks, and I take them to areas of where they have volcanics, areas where they have new minerals and all that. So I agree completely with that. I apologize, something went off. Right.
That's okay. Thank you very much, Professor Gbenga, and thanks for all audience. Thank you again for joining us today. We hope you found this webinar informative and inspiring. Please stay tuned for more information about future events. And thank you all. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. And apologies for the little breaks that we had in between.
No, it's okay. It was very interesting seminar and interesting conversation. And I hope, I encourage all of you to continue engaging with the geoscience community and to support initiative for promoting geoscience. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Many thanks to all of you. I appreciate you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Khulud, would you like to do a
Thank you very
group
much,
photo?
sir.
And let me say this, that GSAf is open to collaborating continuously with COGE in any of the initiatives that we might both want to carry along. Thank you very much again.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody. And thank you.
I would like, sorry, Dr. Khulud, with you, Dr. Inas, I would like all of you to open your camera. We have a group photo before we leaving. Thank you. Just a few minutes, okay?
I'm the only one open
Sorry,
the
a
camera.
few seconds.
Only few people are opening their camera.
Please, everyone, open your camera if you're still attending, so we can take a group photo and commemorate the great event.
Stop also sharing the presentation. It's still on.
Okay. All right. So, Enas, you can stop sharing. I can see Yusuf. Good to see you.
Yes, it's me. How are you?
How are you doing?
Hi, friends.
Hi.
Hello, Prof. Hi, Prof.
Yusuf. Prof, thank you so much, Prof, for the amazing lecture. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah. Very, very good.
Enas, are we good, Enas?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Roberto?
I'm good. Yeah, just another photo, okay? Yep.
Can't see Scott. Scott, where are you? Scott, where are you?
Good to see you, Enas. I have not seen your
I'm
face
here.
for a long time. Good to see your face again.
Oh, thank you, Professor Georgia. It's a long
Good.
time. Miss you too all.
Very long time.
Dr. Khulud, well done. Very well handled. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Good evening, sir.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Goodbye.
Okay, Enas, would you
Bye.
like
Thank
to
you so
goodbye?
much.
Yeah,
Bye.
yeah, good.
See you
Bye.
soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Enas, could you stay on for a moment, or Koji members?
Of course, yes,
Could you
yes.
stay on?
Yes. I just will stop the recording. That's all.
Sure. Wonderful, wonderful webinar. We will